information. And I'll be the first to admit it, as I'm sure all of us golf coaches are. Sometimes I share too much information. But something I'm always trying to be aware of is if I'm doing my job as a golf coach, I'm taking in a ton of information and I'm sorting through it and I'm only presenting what I believe the player needs to know at that time. Hey there, welcome to episode 6 of the Golf Never Sleeps podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Roblard, PGA of Canada golf coach. And on this podcast, I like to just share some of my learnings along the way and provide you some insights on what's inside my head, because the reason why the podcast is called Golf Never Sleeps is because all what I think about is golf, with the simple goal of trying to help you improve your performance, the way you practice and the way you play, to help you shoot lower scores. So today's episode is going to be about technology. In golf specifically, we hear the term golf technology a lot in our everyday lives. We hear the terms technology, and there's some good and some bad and a bunch of different things. And essentially, I'm going to provide my thoughts on, I guess, based on the statement that personally, I love technology. I love all the technology available. This podcast is brought to you by a ton of technology. But also maybe just trying to navigate through the process that I go through around technology and how I present information to my students. And maybe also, if you're just an average golfer listening, maybe give you a little bit of insights on how to handle some of this information that's available to us, because there's tons of information available to us. So first, to give you a little bit of insight, the technology that I use a ton of video. I believe that video is extremely important. I own a launch monitor as well, and I have access to teaching in a facility that has launch monitors available. I own force plates. Force plates are essentially plates you stand on that help you understand the forces that you apply and the pressure and the weight distribution in your feet and how it moves in and how it causes you to move in the golf swing. I also use a few apps that are markerless 3D capture, which literally identifies all the joints in your body and the range of motion and the range of rotation and different things like that. And I've also been able to see some very cool systems as well. I don't want to the technology moves so fast that I don't necessarily want to say that I know all the tech that's available. But I feel like I have a pretty good idea of what's available in the market right now. And to certain extents, I've been able to play and work with and coach with a lot of the different types that are available right now. So in a lesson at different times, I might have a launch monitor going, phone out, force plates. I might be running someone through a 3D assessment as well. But one thing I don't do is I try not to share all of that information. And I'll be the first to admit it, as I'm sure all of us golf coaches are. Sometimes I share too much information. But something I'm always trying to be aware of is if I'm doing my job as a golf coach, I'm taking in a ton of information and I'm sorting through it and I'm only presenting what I believe the player needs to know at that time. And I think a lot of times players and maybe even sometimes coaches get really scared and they talk about, I don't want to know too much. I don't want to have access to all these things. But if we look at the way that we handle everything else in life, if there's things out there to make our lives easier, we're going to do it. If there's something that we can buy that's going to help us do a task in less time, we're probably going to buy it. And that's why I think we're naive to say, I don't think we need a lot of technology in golf. I disagree. I think that this technology, if used properly, if we don't overcomplicate, which kind of goes back to what I said earlier about something that I'm working on or will continue to work on, is I don't want to overcomplicate for my students, but I believe it's really important to be able to have access to a lot of this information. And I think the main reason why is to actually be able to quantify what kind of improvements that we're trying to make. If we want a player to hit the golf ball farther, we want their club head speed to go up, or we want the efficiency of their strike to go up. Without a launch monitor, you have a really hard time by eye telling someone if they're swinging faster or if they're hitting it in the center of the club face, or if they're launching it lower, or if they've reduced their spin. You can't measure that stuff with the naked eye. If we're trying to get a player to generate more club head speed through the force that they apply to the ground, you can't see the amount of force someone's applying into the ground. You can't measure ground reaction forces with your eyes. There's devices out there that will help quantify that. Let's say you have a player that rotates too much in the backswing with their upper body. To be able to give them a number to say, hey, Mr. Jones or Mrs. Jones, in the backswing, your upper body rotates 130 degrees. Ideally, we want that range to be between 90 to 100, let's say. So they start to work on shortening their backswing. And without any tech, they're like, was it shorter? Well, the swing happens so darn fast. Like, well, maybe. But again, with tech, we can look and we can say, okay, well, that might have felt shorter to you, but that was still 130 degrees of rotation. So let's work on a different drill, or let's try to find a different field to actually get that number to change. What I try to do with technology when I'm going through lessons, and again, I'm not saying that I know it all, I'm constantly evolving and trying to learn, is I will use all of this technology and then look at the player in front of me and try to find what are the one or two key things that need to change for this individual to make them improve. I might have someone stand on force plates and capture some data and look at their force data and say, you know what, for this player, it's not the force data that needs to improve. I could look at, I could use Sportsbox AI or one of the 3D apps or devices that shows us all the range of motion in their body. And I might have thought it was hips all the time, but I might look and say that it's upper body. Or I might just be looking at club data, or I might be looking at the club face and the club path. And I'm going to take all of that information and say, okay, for this young player to hit the golf ball better, we have to work on this one thing. That's when I'll show the player some of those numbers. And then that's when we'll start to go down the avenue of how we're going to change that one specific number. I'm looking at all the others, but I just want them to have a little bit of awareness. Ryan has told me that I'm trying to have more hip rotation in the backswing, and we know that we're going to be able to quantify it as an example. Hey, I've just got a quick favor to ask, and I'll get you back to the episode. If you're enjoying these episodes, I need you to do me a favor. Can you please like, subscribe, and give me a positive review? Whether you're listening podcast, YouTube, wherever you're listening, your support in form of a subscription or review really helps the podcast grow and also means a lot to me. So if you're enjoying this, make sure you let me know by subscribing or leaving a review, and I'll keep making more great content. Now back to the episode. Now, the thing we have to be careful of, and we're all like this, is I know that when there's numbers available, I'm always going to be looking and I'm always going to be wondering, hey, what's that number? What does this number mean? What does that number mean? And something that I try to do a good job of is make sure that my players understand if there's a bunch of numbers up there, or if there's, let's use TrackMan as an example, right? When you get up on TrackMan, there's 20 numbers at the bottom that are available. I quickly try to remove the tiles that I don't think are important, but the ones that are up there, whether it be swing direction or low point or angle of attack or club path or club face, I try to make sure 100% of the time that my players have an understanding of what those numbers mean. So if they do start to wander and look at other things, at least they're knowledgeable in doing so. I think sometimes we're often to say when the data is up there, oh, don't worry about it. And once the players can see it, they're going to start to worry about it. And I think that when a player has access to technology on their own, I try to think ahead to that. I would much rather them be very educated on what some of those key numbers mean, instead of them having no idea, and then they get to a facility that has TrackMan, they're just trying to manipulate the club face number when it's their angle of attack that needs to change, as an example. So I guess the point that I'm trying to make right now, I believe technology is a good thing. I believe that coaches have to do a better job educating their players on just telling them straight up, there's going to be a lot of things going on right now or that I'm going to be looking at, but my goal is just to find the one or two things that you need to work on. And if you do go back home because you own a launch monitor or you have a simulator in your garage or whatever it may be, these are what these numbers mean. And I only want you to focus on these numbers right now. And yes, down the road, we might get these other numbers, but these are the ones I need you to work on right now. Just focus on these couple of numbers. Don't get too far in the weeds with the other ones. So let's pivot a little bit to, if I could only use one. We get that a lot. If you could only have one piece of tech, what would it be? And I guess for right now, my current opinion, and again, this is an opinion that changes all the time, I believe that a launch monitor is probably the most valuable right now because it tells us what the club and the ball are doing. And there are some great tools out there that can help us understand how the player's body works. But if I had to pick one, ultimately that club or that golf ball is hit by a golf club, and I really want to know what directions that golf club and club face are traveling when they hit a shot. And I guess maybe the last thing I'll leave on this thought of technology is, if you're a player, I want you to ask a lot of questions. If you have access to tech, if your coach is using tech, I want you to ask a lot of questions. And I often hear this phrase where players say, I don't want to overthink. If we look at the way that we live our day-to-day lives, we have just a flood of information coming in at all times, and we're actually kind of training ourselves to just have an incredible amount of information at all times. So I don't want you to shy away from technology. If it's present, ask questions and make yourself as knowledgeable as you can be. An interesting thing that I like to do, bouncing from indoors to outdoors, is when we're indoors, I'm making sure that my player understands if the ball is starting left and curving right, it means your club face is this, it means your face is that. When we get outside and a player starts to struggle and they have an undesirable ball flight, my question to them will be, well, based on what we learned in the winter, what do you think your club path and your club face was there? Which one was open, which one was closed, which one was left, which one was right? And when they start to understand that, then they're starting to reverse engineer that ball flight into what they think is happening at impact. I think that is such a valuable tool for a player when they practice, and also for when they play. And if they feel like the wheels might be starting to come off, if they know, coach told me indoors I have an open club face, and now I know when the ball, even though the ball curves in this direction, it probably means that my club face is open. And that's why I do this drill, or that's why I do this rehearsal swing. I think we can use technology to make players a lot more educated and hopefully do a little bit better job self-diagnosing when they practice or when they play by themselves, to auto-correct or maybe self-correct themselves into hitting better shots. So I love technology. I think it's great. I think there's always some parameters we have to live within. I think personally as a coach, I'm always going to try to be at the forefront of what technology is available. But I guess maybe for myself and I hope maybe for others as coaches, I think the responsibility that we have is to use it properly. Let's make sure we're just giving at the time the players the information that they need. But as you start to spend weeks and months and years with players around technology, I hope that we continue to develop them into being smarter golfers that understand that technology that's in front of them and how it can help them hit better golf shots and shoot lower scores. Those are my thoughts on golf tech right now. I'm sure they're going to change as technology continues to improve and advance. I hope you've enjoyed this podcast. This has been another episode of the Golf Never Sleeps podcast. If you enjoy it, please like and subscribe. If you leave me a review, that would be fantastic. And I look forward to sharing more as I go. Happy golfing.